All right. Where are we? Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Can't I hear you all out of my speaker? Where's this phone is connected? Okay, can you guys hear me now? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I think I can hear you too. Good. Good. Yay! Week 9. Ooh. Week 9. I'm desperately trying to figure out a way to make the semester easier for me. And if you guys can come up with ways, that'd be appreciated. I don't care if it's easier for you guys. I mean, we could figure out a way for it to be easier for everybody, but for me in particular, let me know. Oh, I was going to set up a thing. Let's see. Marilyn Johnson. There we go. Marilyn Johnson.
Bird a bird.
Yeah, that was weird. That was weird. Okay, Marilyn Johnson. Ooh, Zoom meeting ID. How do I copy and paste this? Does anybody remember the format to Zoom? Is there a link or something? Oh, I know, I could just, you and I, there we go, okay. Yeah, nice, thank you, Jackson. You are my hero. What if they have a what if the meeting has a password? This is relevant to this class, sort of. Wait to be admitted, fair enough. Okay. The reason this matters for this class will be apparent once I share this screen. Hopefully it is now apparent. I was setting up a redirect from thoughtontap.com. So again, remember, so many possibilities of extra credit in this class. One of the possibilities of extra credit is if you go to a talk that is available, that it has occurred within the semester, and things that are automatically acceptable to use as extra credit are philosophy talks or integrative neuroscience talks, maybe even psychology talks, but anything in that ballpark gets to count. We are having our first talk of the semester in the philosophy department. We had somebody cancel in September. So this is officially our first one, and it's tomorrow at 4:30. And I think I have set up a redirect, which I realize I have not actually tried out yet. Philosophy. Was that going to kick me out of this meeting? I hope not. Yeah. Oh. Enter the meeting password. Whatever, I'll figure that out later. The password is UNRPhil. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so how is everybody? Semester okay?
It has been an incredibly strange week for me.
In any particular way? Just
Direct
strange?
relative decided to join QAnon for some goddamn reason, and then wanted to talk to me about it. I was like, "What the fuck is going on?"
Oh, QAnon. One of the like high up muckety mucks in QAnon claims to be a time traveler from the future, which is like, all right, fuck it, we're done. We're
It's
done with
because it's a
rationality.
game from a space on the internet where the entire point is you don't have an identity, and it's not if you're true, it's if you're convincing. That's the entire game. And I tried to explain this to him, and it was. I'm not getting into that. I'm not distracted. Fucking.
QAnon. Okay. Fuck. All right, everybody else good? Eh. Uh,
I early voted. That was nice.
yeah, me too. Look, I did that today at the Lawler Center.
It was a lot
You
easier
should.
than I thought it would be because I went on like the first day and there was like no lines.
Yeah, it's pretty empty. It's I follow John Ralston, who is the Nevada independent editor. He's essentially the go-to source for Nevada politics news. And he has correctly predicted how Nevada goes the past like I don't know 10 elections in a row based on early voting numbers, which is and it's weird this year because Democrats are vastly out pacing Republicans. Sorry, registered Democrats are vastly outpacing registered Republicans on mail-in voting, but not on on early voting, which is not what ever happens. Who knows? Anyway. Okay. Recap time. Let's recap. New segment this week. We'll talk about evolutionary psychology today, and then next week we're going to talk about animal cognition. That's fun. That's always just fun. So what we have covered in this class so far is quite a bit. We've covered historical views of the mind. We started off with that. We spent quite a bit of time on that. And that was just to try to get you to understand how our thinking about the mind has changed over time. Each of those has come up again and again throughout the class. I think I've now brought them all back at some point. Every one of them has come up in one of the topics at least once. Then I gave some theoretical background on philosophy of science or theories of computation and information so that we could understand cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience being a special specification of that comes up again and again. But there were some major issues with integration, which we've talked about. And then we spent some time on mental architectures, that is, whether the mind is like a computer or whether it's more like a network or if it's everything, how it fits. In the past couple of weeks, we've talked about consciousness, cognitive illusions, and then perception and concepts. Y'all remember all of this? None of this is surprising. So the past couple of weeks have all been on broadly the topic of cognition. Before that, it was broadly the topic of mental architecture. Now we're doing a 2-week section on biology, and then we're going to do a week and a half on embodiment, and then a week and a half on neuroethics. And then we're done. Semester's over. You have a poster presentation after that, but then we're done with contents right around early November. Fair? Should be fun. Okay. So background, damn it, it's not representation. Oh, whatever, you guys can correct it in your mind. The background is going to be some early phrenology, the idea of the mind being divided, right? And
The skull thing?
yeah. the basic idea be so not the actual skull part. That is not the thing I want you to remember, although that was so early phrenology, if you recall. They believed that certain parts of the mind were responsible for certain traits, that the mind was located in the brain, that as the brain developed, it changed the shape of the skull, and as the skull grew into adulthood, you could actually figure out what kind of a person was by the shape of the skull. Ignore the last two parts. The things that are relevant here are that parts of the mind are responsible for specific things. That's it. And the mind is in the brain. That last step, that the skull is being modified as you grow up, and that's ridiculous. But phrenology, that aspect of it's relevant. Perception we just talked about last week, so hopefully you remember that. Remember that it's automatic, that it's about some of it is about concepts, some of it's about objects in the world, some of it's just sense perceptions. And it really is just automatic. There's a part of perception where you cannot help but perceive some things. If you're looking at a stop sign, try not to read the word stop. Just try. Like, look at the word stop, you might have like a short word in front of you somewhere. Try to find a word and not read it. But focus on the word. Don't blur your eyes. Focus on the word and try not to read it. It's hard. It's actually really hard. It might be doable, but it's hard. So we'll talk about that again.
Breaking it into phonetics. I'm not sure that was intended.
I mean, so depending on your particular training, you might actually just start studying the font or something, right? I don't know. But all of us know how to read, so when you look at certain words, you automatically read it. You cannot help but read it. The longer the word is, the less you do it automatically. And then mental architecture, that's going to be relevant to modularity of the mind, which I'll talk about. I also talked a little bit about evolutionary theory in the videos for this week. Evolutionary theory is my jam. I am officially a philosopher of biology, so I can talk about that all day, but I'm not going to recap that today. That led to a discussion of evolutionary psychology, which has some problems, which we'll talk about. But evolutionary psychology accepts this view of the mind called massive modularity, which is different than another view called just maybe moderate modularity. So we'll talk about those right now. First, evolutionary psychology, which has been a thing that has been approached. People have tried to do some evolutionary psychology for 150 years, since the time of Darwin, basically. And every time there's been a new approach proposed, and there's been challenges to it. So Darwin talks about the idea of altruism. Like, why would I ever help any of you? Why would you ever help each other? We do it sometimes. We don't always do it, but we do it. And so this is a big problem in biology if you think about it, because organisms live and die, and if you help other organisms, you're not helping yourself. So then a lot of people came up with reasons why you are helping yourself secretly, right? Maybe you're helping them because they share genes with you, like they're your family. Cool. All right, so you help your parents and your kids and your cousins because they're related to you. All right, there's this way in which you're secretly helping yourself. Or maybe you're helping them because you're expecting them to help you back later on. All right, cool, sure. Or maybe you're helping them because they're a member of your group in some way, like they live in your hometown, or or you've like subscribed to the same, there's not even podcasts or something, right? Like you're part of the same community. You're all QAnon support. Jesus, please no. You're all Q supporters. So you help each other. All right, cool. So those are ways that people have thought about using evolutionary theory and justifying this this phenomenon that we have, like we help each other. We don't always do it. In fact, we very regularly walk past homeless people and don't give them money, but we do help each other sometimes. So evolutionary psychology is just the latest approach to this, to try to understand how psychology could be consistent with biology, certain features of psychology anyway. And there's these five claims, five assumptions of the proposal of evolutionary psychology, the way it was developed in the 90s. The first is that the brain is a physical system and it functions as a computer, which we've already talked about, that kind of general approach. This next step is that these neural circuits, now we're extending the metaphor a little bit much, maybe too much, but we'll talk about that. Was designed by natural and sexual selection. So here design is this, it's a weird term, but it comes up in evolutionary theory. And what it means is just trial and error over millions of years. It's the appearance of design, not actual design. What follows from that is most of what goes on in your mind is hidden from you. And if you recall back to the consciousness lectures or the perception lectures, that sort of makes sense. There's a lot of stuff for which it's presumably irrelevant if you're actually aware of them or not. And even if it isn't irrelevant, it might come after the fact. And then 4 and 5, our neural circuits are specialized to solving problems that our ancestors faced. And so we have a modern skulls housing a Stone Age mind. That's the slogan. Make sense? Amanda, you look skeptical. We'll get to the skepticism. We will. I love the way you always look skeptical no matter what we discuss. Resting skepticism. That's awesome. Okay. I have a rule. I have some cards. I wish I actually had, I do have cards with me. I have cards. And actually ignore what it says. But on one side, there's a vowel. And on the other side on one side is a letter, and on the other side is a number, okay? Okay? Each card has a letter and a number on each side. And I'm showing you 4 particular cards right now. E, C, 4, and 5. Those are the sides of the cards that you have visible in front of you. And now I'm telling you a rule that I claim is true about these cards. If there is a vowel on one side, then there is an odd number on the other side. Okay? We're all okay with the setup so far? And I tell you, you don't want to trust me. You don't know if this rule is true or false. So you want to flip over some cards. What are the fewest number of cards you have to flip over, and which cards do you have to flip over in order to test that rule?
Two.
Rule is vowel equals odd, right?
The rule is if vowel, then odd. It's not vowel equals odd. But 2 is the right number
Well,
for the
then
number
the
of cards.
only thing you need to flip is the E, because that's not a implied two-way relationship.
Yeah, it's
The E is
mono
the only one you can
directional.
test the rule with.
Okay, let's say you flip over E, right? If you flip over E and it is an odd number on the other side, then the rule has checked out. If you flip over E and it's an even number, it has failed. So that is a good rule that is a good card to flip. So far we flip over E. Should we flip over any other cards?
4.
4. Why?
Why would we flip over 4?
To make sure it's not a vowel, or to make sure it's not a vowel. because you want to make sure that the rule still checks out for if you flip over a number.
Why would the rule apply to numbers? The rule is only vowel must have odd. That doesn't mean that odd must have vowel.
But if you flip over 4 and it's a vowel, then the rule is already broken. Because then you could flip that back over and it's a 4. So then the rule is broken.
I think the rule only applies for the face-up situation, which in that case, the only card you should flip is E, because that's the only one that would give you information on the rule.
And I don't think it's exclusive. I think the 4 can have a vowel.
But then that would break the rule if you flipped that card.
I'm not saying I disagree with the base premise. I'm saying that if you flip 4 and you get a consonant, you get Z. You haven't learned anything functional about the situation. Where if you flip the card with the E, no matter what, you learn something functional. But because we don't know if odds must have vowels in the same way that vowels must have odds, none of these other cards apply to our situation.
It'd have to be if vowel then odd, and odd, or if odd then vowel, in order for us to care about anything else.
All right, Maverick, do you want me to come in and save you?
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm right, but maybe I'm not saying it correctly.
You are right. So the rule is if there is a vowel on one side of the card, then there is an odd number on the other side of the card. It's not if it's visible as a vowel now, then the other side is odd, right? And I'll give you an analogy. Let's say you are a bartender, okay? You are a bartender in a state where the legal drinking age is 21. And all of a sudden, four people come in. You see 2 of them. One looks very, very young. They look like they're less than 21 years old. The other one is an ancient, decrepit person. They are very obviously over 21. Your waiter tells you that on one of the tables, somebody has ordered a beer and another person has ordered tea. You are told if somebody is younger than 21, you should card them if they order alcohol. Who do you card? Is this easier?
I don't think the situation translates, though.
Why not?
Because in the original example, there was no rule that said that a consonant could also have an odd on the other side. Just that a vowel, if there was a vowel, then there had to be an odd on the other side. So in this example, while you do have if young, booze is impossible, sure, you would want to card the 4, obviously, because now you have to prove the negation. But in the original example, all you have to do is show, you know what? Nope, it just clicked. Never mind. It just clicked. I recant my prior position, and I now agree with Maverick.
It's cool, isn't it? Was it easier to think about the carding situation than the number and vowel situation? Yeah. So in the early 90s, these people, Cosmides and Tooby, ran a study with a bunch of undergrads where they made up a story. This is a completely made up story. And the idea was that they were trying to test this rule. If a man is eating a cassava root, then he must have a tattooed face. Okay? So the The story is there's an island somewhere in the Pacific where cassava roots are desired delicacies, and only tattooed people with tattooed faces get these cassava roots. If they don't get these priced, or if they don't get this like nice delicacy, they have to eat something called a molo nut, which is nutritious but doesn't taste that good. All right, it's like a weird, convoluted story, and yet they made up two versions of this story. On the first version, all of the men that had tattooed faces lived on one side of the island, and that was also the side of the island where cassava roots grew. On the other story, all of the all of the men without a tattooed face lived on the side of the island where molo nuts grew. Also, in order to get a tattooed face, getting a tattooed face in this story was how you showed you were married, right? It was like an eternal bond that permanently identified you. So they give this weird example to a bunch of students, and they say, okay, let's do two versions of it. One is descriptive, and the other is like a social rule. Students did really poorly in the descriptive case, even though it was logically identical. But in the social rule case, where they said, no, once you get a tattooed face, once you get married, they tattoo your face, you earn the right to eat this delicacy. Then the participants tended to do better, because if they saw somebody without a tattooed face eating the delicacy, they would think, oh, you jerk, you are violating the ethical norm.
Breaking the law, breaking the law.
Does this make sense? So the weird part about this, I gave you the vowel on one side, a consonant, vowel and odd number example, right? And that one is a kind of a weird case, hard to think about. It is logically identical. And when I say logically identical, I mean it really is, right? If you've taken philosophy classes, one of them is modus ponens, one of them is denying the antecedent, one of them is modus tollens, and the other one is affirming the consequence. Those are four, like, some of the most basic principles of logic. Two of them are logical fallacies, two are proper forms of reasoning. So you structure the exact four cases again with the drinking age, drinking under 21, and alcohol, and people get it. But you might say, okay, no, we've lived in that society a long time. We know how alcohol works. You know what to do. What if we made an equivalent version of it in a society that was completely fictional, that nobody could possibly have familiarity with? And so they made this version, these two logically identical, but societally different versions of this example. And people just did better when you associated violations, like cheating, as one of the logical consequences. Evidence, they say, that we are able to detect cheaters socially, but we did not evolve to detect logical principles like modus ponens and modus tollens. So even when it's logically identical, you get the answer wrong if it doesn't involve a violation of some societal expectation or something like that. Okay, so that's evolutionary psychology. In the video, I talk a lot more about that. Jesus, it goes on for like 50 minutes. But there are a bunch of objections to evolutionary psychology, and these objections are pretty strong in a lot of ways. The first objection is is one feature of evolutionary psychology that we'll talk about in the next slide. This idea of modularity, massive modularity. Evolutionary psychology presumes that there is some selection for these like forms of reasoning, these brain processes. The previous example was supposed to show you that there is a cheater detection module. And module here just means like process. We're good at detecting cheaters. Some people have objected and said, hey, why the hell? We could have any number of things that evolved by natural selection. We don't need a module for detecting cheaters. We could have behavioral responses, innate knowledge. All of those are possible. Why the Pleistocene? I forgot to type that second bullet point in. The Pleistocene is where a lot of the stories in evolutionary psychology come up. The Pleistocene was the era right before human civilization sprung up, so the past 2 million years, basically. And the idea is humans were living in hunter-gatherer societies, and our brains evolved in that time period. Therefore, they should be adapted to that time period. But we no longer live in that time period. But one of the objections is, well, actually, life is 3.5 billion years old on this planet. We all descended from some origin 3.5 billion years ago. Many of the features that our brain has evolved to do, many of the processes, involve in incorporating things that had already evolved. So smell, some analog of it was around 3 billion years ago, right? Like bacteria can detect gradients of chemicals, right? And other things as well. Furthermore, even recent, like even very biological traits have evolved within the past 10,000 years. Right, like lactose tolerance has evolved very recently. So that picking this particular time period is a weird time period to pick for studying human psychology. The next objection is that evolution by natural selection seems to be this hammer that everybody points to that they really like, but that doesn't explain most features in biology. You look at Carlos, you're like, oh, Carlos, you are a human being who has a chin. I have a chin. You look at me, I'm a person with a chin. I don't. None of us actually have chins biologically. There's just two growth plates that have to stop somewhere. They meet. And so they can either go concave or super convex or make it like a butt chin or whatever. But if you look anywhere in your genes, you're only going to find those coding for those growth plates, and then they stop. So a chin is not a feature. It seems like it should be a biological feature, but it is not quite in the same way. Big smiles.
So it's more of a category error than it is like a descriptive error. Like the process is happening, but we just categorize it as chin as opposed to the bit where the two bones meet, if I follow this correctly?
That's right. Yeah. And a lot of features of biology are like that. And in fact, psychological features might be really like that. So I have an onion here. Onions have 5 times as many genes as humans do. Lungfishes have 40 times as many genes as we do. Presumably not all of those were selected for some feature of making onions super special. Maybe they were. Maybe they need every one of those genes. And then finally, a lot of these studies are done using undergraduates like you guys, and you're all weird. And if we try to do studies on populations around the world or that are hunter-gatherers or not quite undergraduates, it's not obvious how much that generalizes. So these are all objections to evolutionary psychology. Fair? Any comments or questions on evolutionary psychology before I move on to modularity? Okay. So in evolutionary psychology, there is the idea that the mind is organized as a series of highly specialized cognitive modules. And the word module is like a bad word in this context. Just think processes or something that evolved to solve particular problems. Because they evolved to solve particular problems, they're all domain specific, and there's not a general domain. There's not like a you that evolved at any point. There's not like, you're just like a weird mishmash of modules that are intersecting in various ways. An alternative to this is another view of modularity, which was proposed to go along with the computational theory of mind way back in the day. I didn't talk about that then because there's just a lot to talk about, but I'm talking about it now. This was the view that Jerry Fodor, who proposed the language of thought hypothesis, who we've talked about a little bit, he proposed this as a view of modularity of the mind. And he argued that our mind has a lot of these specialized modules. So look at these, those boxes, right? I promise you, I drew them myself. I am swearing to you that each of the orange lines is the same length. All of them are the exact same length. And all of the like light blue ones, all of the blue grayish lines, they are also the exact same length. Trust me, I did that myself. You can measure it on the screen if you like. Trust me. But even knowing that, it's kind of hard to look at those boxes and not see them as different sizes, right? It's really hard unless you like cover up some of the evidence to see those as being the exact same size. And the same with the railway illusion on the right hand of the screen. The two green lines are the same length. You can measure them yourself, but you still can't see them that way. Knowing whatever you know, you still cannot help but seeing them as different sizes. If we were in class right now, I would ask one of you to like poke somebody else in the eye. So if you have like a friend nearby, get them to like jab their finger as close to your eye as possible, so that so you can see that no matter how much you trust your friend, you still flinch when when the finger gets too close to your eye. It doesn't matter what you know about the world, Fodor says. That processing is cognitively impenetrable. So it doesn't matter what's in your head, you still flinch every time the finger gets close to your eye. You still see the optical illusions as illusions. You can't help. And so the idea is that there are these modules. Fodor doesn't talk about how they came about, but he thinks that they exist, that are domain-specific, cognitively impenetrable, informationally encapsulated, fast, mandatory, and bottom-up. And the contrast is something going on in your executive, like some general reasoning, the thinking slow part of your brain. That lets you make plans, lets you incorporate all of the evidence that you've got. That's the you for this view of modularity. So it kind of fits into like the behavioral economics discussion too. If you remember behavioral economics, there was thinking fast and thinking slow. These automatic judgments that you made that were actually poorly reasoned in a lot of ways, and yet you kept making them. You think hitchhiking is more dangerous than driving, for example, or whatever. Okay. So So these are the two general approaches. The massive modularity view advocated by evolutionary psychologists, you might think about it as a horizontal organization of the mind. There's no real central organization going on. It's all just a bunch of like systems interacting with each other in various ways. Or you might think about the mind as vertically organized. In that case, you've got a lot of like quick perceptual systems, quick other systems that are like modular. They like, it doesn't matter what you think about them. Your mind processes the word stop in a stop sign before you think about it, even if you try to stop yourself from thinking about it. And that's the moderate modularity view. Okay, so that's everything about modularity. Any questions on any of this?
Yeah, I was kind of interested as to why, I guess, innateness is such an important quality of modules. I know like some really straightforward modules or cognitive areas of the brain are for like very specific things, but it seems weird to describe that as innate rather than just specific or any of the like other descriptions we have here.
Yeah, that's a good question. And innateness, there's some sliding back and forth on what people mean by innateness too, right? Like some of the modules are innate in that you like innately see objects or colors, right? And others are innate in the sense that you are predisposed to develop certain ways of processing the world. So in some, the innateness is the trait or the processing itself, and in the others, it's the disposition to process things in a certain way. That's a great question, and it's actually one of the objections to Fodor's view of modularity. I gave you a bunch of examples of these modules of like the eye poke and the illusions that all behave in roughly the same way. But a lot of the examples that people that advocate modularity give are not entirely cognitively impenetrable. They're not entirely innate in the same way. They're not entirely informationally encapsulated in the same way. So I gave you all of the easy cases, but there's a bunch of stuff that's in the middle where thinking about them as really, really, really modular, just like their own little things, is actually the wrong way to think about it. Yeah. Good question. Good worry. I wish I had an answer for you.
Well, no, I think you cleared up at least why it's important to use that as a descriptor for sure. I think like in more aspects of what innateness can mean in the situation.
Right. And the strange thing is when we describe these modules, it's almost as if we're giving necessary and sufficient conditions. Like these are what modules are. And yet maybe it's closer to just a general concept. There's a lot of things that are modulish, and some things are really close to the center of what a module is, and other things are a little bit less modular.
Yeah, when you were describing, or like when the articles were describing mental architectures, I thought that module was kind of like synonymous with node, or like it's just kind of a building block, or kind of one of the things in like a system that does a task or handles tasks.
That might be a better way to think about it. Yeah, I like that. I hadn't. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, where are we on time? Oh shit! I don't know if we're gonna. Oh no, this is last week's. I don't know if we have time to break out into groups. Damn it! I talked too long. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna toss these questions out there, and you guys all tell me what you think. Yeah. What psychological traits do you think would benefit? We'll talk about benefiting first from an evolutionary approach.
What do you mean benefit? Like our perspective of them would benefit?
It would be more explanatory if it turned out that evolution could explain them. Jackson, I think you're muted, or I can't hear you. I can't hear now.
There is a lot of fruit with linguistic studies involving research into things like crows, certain varieties of animal, the great apes that can do sign language.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
you could look at how a lot of these earlier species used communicative abilities, like howler monkeys, for example, and then you can kind of see how certain languages develop in that same almost proto-evolutionary fashion. Like if you have an area that's very industrial, their slang is going to be more plosive, more monosyllabic, and incorporating phonemes that you can make very loud noise with because, well, obviously, you need to tell somebody he's about to get beamed by a steel beam, louder than the steel beam. But then other areas that don't have that, I'm sorry, I have someone trying to get my attention right now.
Okay. That's really cool. We'll talk about animal language next week, actually. That's a really, I'd never thought about, I remember when I visited Canada and like my face felt like it was frozen and I felt like I couldn't move my mouth very much and I started sounding more Canadian. I was like, huh, all right, huh. Jackson, can you speak now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna talk about like neurodivergence, because like we understand like neuropathologies in a very limited and specific way, and they're kind of like a lot of symptoms will overlap, and we'll have like not really have clear boundaries on like what different uh what's the word? What different types of I can't think of it.
Dysfunction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they are. Like, but if we could understand them in a way that was like more suited towards what kinds of social role you had or what kind of role you had in your tribe, you know, it might like bring a lot of insight into like what is actually going on.
That's fascinating. I think abnormal psychology in general could benefit from a different reorganization, just because we don't have, like, we have 0 biological tests for psychological disorders. The entire DSM has no biological tests. So a lot of it is diagnosed based on the categories that are in the book and how psychologists that are talking to patients cluster certain phenomena, right? Certain behaviors. So we came up with words and concepts to unify them and like diagnostic criteria. But we could have come up with other words and other diagnostic criteria, and we would have grouped all of the, you know, behavioral personality, whatever disorders differently. And I think thinking biologically in terms of other aspects, you know, like what exactly is going wrong in various forms of schizophrenia or various forms of whatever might be helpful. That's a cool suggestion. Yeah. Oh, there's a chat. Let's see, where's the chat? Fair enough. Amanda.
Hold on. I don't know a ton about evolution, but I do know that a lot of our genetic code comes from bacteria. So we just have like bacteria DNA and our DNA. Does that have an effect on our behavior, or do we not know?
Fascinating. You want to hear?
This is fascinating, actually, because I have to deal with some of this because I inherited weird gut flora from. You inherit your gut bacteria from your mother's side of the family through a horrifying process you don't want to know about. But long and short of it is that your gut flora actually can meaningfully affect your palate in this weird sort of Pavlovian conditioning kind of way. So there are certain foods that I'm not biologically allergic to. My immune system doesn't react, but the gut flora does react, so I may as well be allergic to it. So like pizza sauce, for example, can't have it.
Wait. This is because of your genetics that affect your gut flora, or?
So you have beasties that live in your digestive tract
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
inherit from your mother's side of the family.
Okay.
If they are meaningfully different in specific ways, they can affect your palate in a sort of Pavlovian conditioning sense, because they'll do something that'll cause your body to react. So your body has nothing wrong with it. You just have some domestic terrorists in your intestines that hate tomato sauce for some reason.
Got it.
This is fascinating. Okay, all right. I'm
Because
just
like I
gonna
know
go.
that we evolved along with bacteria that just kind of like lives in us now, and we're just like that. But as far as I know, no one ever discusses how that's changed like human beings as a whole. Like it's just there. Everyone talks about it like it's just there and it doesn't have an effect.
98% of the cell types in your body are not your own.
Yeah. So what
That's
does that mean?
that means that there is a bunch of stuff in your body that if you did not have it, you could not digest food. Your ova could not separate, which means you could not reproduce. Like we need them so much in every respect. It's crazy.
But does that
Uh,
not affect like our like brain processing and stuff?
it has. I mean, it has to affect something, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so another thing that you mentioned, you were talking about our genetic code. So we have about 100 genes that are more closely related to bacteria than to our nearest primate relatives, like chimpanzees.
Mhm.
So sometime in the past 6 million years, humans were infected by a virus that snuck DNA into our genetic code and it stuck there. And that DNA was probably taken from some bacterium somewhere.
Isn't that like the foundational like stuff that allows that might allow CRISPR to do weird things to us?
Yeah, so CRISPR is this was discovered in the 80s and in 2011. In fact, two of the people that discovered its application just won the Nobel Prize last week. The first two women to win a chemistry Nobel Prize together without sharing it with a man or with anybody else. But that CRISPR is this thing that allows, it's a protein that can detect parts of the genetic code because it has this like little segment of RNA. It's like 20 nucleotides long. It's like a barcode. And yeah, we can use it to like modify all sorts of things. Anyway, to the original question. Yeah. So CRISPR is going to be like a big deal in the near future. Is already a big deal. So the original question about whether our bacteria that we co-evolved with and that are actively with us, co-evolving around us, whether they can affect our psychology. I mean, there's the behavioral aspects that Joseph was talking about in terms of like avoiding foods. There might be also be evidence that it affect like the, for example, when you sweat, that smell that you have, that's not you, that's bacteria. You're smelling each other's bacteria. It's crazy. So that kind of stuff might affect sexual selection. That might affect desirability or various things. I don't know. Psychologically, I mean, there's evidence that I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of direct things that I know about that fit that. I'm sure there is, but I'm not sure it's been extensively studied, or at least I'm not aware of those details.
I've heard of people researching the connection between like depression and anxiety and your gut flora. I've heard of that, so I think some people are investigating that.
Yeah, I mean, that seems very plausible to me. There's some really messed up studies where they switch the microbes of a mouse with the microbes of another mouse, and one of the mice gets obese because they took the microbes from the obese mouse. Just like, so if you want to lose weight, you can drink a poop milkshake of your healthiest friend.
We
So
can never uplift mice to sentience. They'll be the first creatures we can, but we can never do that to them.
No, that's Jackson.
I was gonna ask, like, is that bacteria that we amass through the environment, or is that bacteria that are produced through our DNA?
No,
So
no,
this
it's
is some. Oh, sorry. This is actually something I have a bit more experience with because it does affect my diet. So a lot of these we don't necessarily know where they came from, but granted, you're not being born via C-section. You inherit your gut bacteria from your mother, who inherited it from her mother, and so on and so on. It's sort of like mitochondria, how you inherit them matrilinearly. We don't know quite where they came from. We just know where we're getting them today. And you can get some introduced through the environment. Like you can take acidophilus pills, for example, to mitigate certain gut flora issues. The problem is that, like, without some severe, deeply strange medical procedures, you won't ever be able to intake enough gut bacteria to outcompete what's already living there just by sheer biomass.
Yeah, so I mean, our study of this is like in its nascent stages, in that we can only tell uh, basically just phylum level difference. Sometimes it's the equivalent of like you're hanging out in your house and like there's 5 cockroaches nearby, let's say, and then somebody takes you all out and replaces you with 2 chimpanzees and 10 ants. Are the ways that we study the microbes in our stomach would not be able to tell the difference between those two because the ratios of primates to arthropods are the same. So we can't tell, like, and presumably, I mean, presumably you've got a lot of differences between you and an orangutan, right? Um, it's actually probably worse than that. It would be like replacing you with like a, I don't know, with a wildebeest, something that could have an entirely different ecological role. It could behave entirely differently, and we cannot tell the difference. But you can actually, like, when you get food poisoning, that actually is bacteria that you've eaten out competing your flora. And it can have permanent effects. There was a cool study that I saw where it followed 2 people over a calendar year where they had to give stool samples every day. And one of them got food poisoning about 8 months through the study. And the microbiota in his stomach never recovered, ever, throughout the rest of the study.
Might also have something to do with shellfish allergies, because if you're exposed to an area that's super heavy in cockroaches, you can get certain contaminations from the cockroaches that then leave you more vulnerable to developing shellfish algae like lobster, shrimp, that sort of thing. And I mean, yeah, like cockroaches and shrimp are similar, but it's really weird that being in a building that's infested with cockroaches can make you unable to eat shrimp anymore.
Fair enough. So the downside of thinking biologically here is that a lot of people think of biology as being essential in some way. And so there have been a lot of people that have attempted to use evolutionary psychology to justify sexism and racism and all sorts of other isms. That's sort of what I was trying to gather from you guys when I forced you into the breakout rooms, if I forced you into the breakout rooms with the first question. Because there's a lot of like really bad stuff that's not just bad morally, but actually probably really bad scientifically, that has been attempted to be justified biologically.
Is that called like social Darwinism or something?
Yeah, it's related. Eugenics. So they're related. Social Darwinism was proposed by Herbert Spencer 100 and change years ago. And he was arguing about it being like the rich people do best because they're better at being rich. Eugenics is the biological version of that, proposed by Francis Galton right around the same time. Actually, it wasn't originally racist, it was just classist. But when we brought it into the United States, we made it racist. Madison Grant writes this book. I teach this in one of my other classes. It's the reason I know a lot about this. He writes this book where he's describing the Nordic race that eventually Hitler reads and rebrands as the Aryan race. It is like complete bullshit on stilts. He argues that all of the good things humans have ever done were because secretly a bunch of people from Norway snuck to like Egypt and bred with people, and then snuck to all of the other accomplished areas of the world and bred with people. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But yeah, that's eugenics. And it doesn't go away. People keep giving these arguments. Okay. Can anyone think of it? Oh, no. Can anyone think of any other aspects of cognition that are not perception, that are cognitively impenetrable? Things that you cannot, yes.
Wait, no, I have just a question. What makes
do it.
perception impenetrable?
It
Just
does,
like if you look at a word and you have to read it, that's what you're talking about?
basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another example is the fire flinch response. Your hand will jerk back before you realize you've been burnt. You don't need to think about not being lit on fire. You'll naturally try to get away from it.
Ooh. That's a good one.
Is that cognitive though? Because you could argue the same thing for like when you hit your knee and it like kicks your foot out. It could just be like a purely physical reflex.
Well, purely physical is still cognitively impenetrable. I don't need to think about pumping heart through myself, but I still have a thing that's having an electric pulse that's making it do that. It's just segregating what we are consciously aware of and what's just a part of the system that's still objectively us, but not something that we have total awareness of or even the ability to work our way around. I can't think my heart to stop.
Heart might actually be a bad one, because if you meditate for long enough, you can eventually affect it in some ways.
Right, my
right.
bad.
Spleen is better. But heart's a good example because most of us can't affect it, right? Unless you like jog up and down stairs for a while. But yeah, so in 2 weeks, not next week. Next week we're talking about fun animals. But in 2 weeks we're going to be talking about embodied cognition, and then we're going to be like twisting the idea about what is going on in cognition, period. Right? In the embodied cognition discussion, your body becomes more central to you thinking, and a lot of things that you thought involved a lot of thinking become more bodily and actually don't require a lot of thinking. So it's going to be a fun discussion too.
So cognitive impenetrability, I just want to be clear the definition. That means that you can't mediate the process consciously at all, right? But you also can't kind of discern where it's coming from. Is that also part of it?
I mean, I guess you could eventually discern where it's coming from, like if you do studies, but in your own mind, through your own introspection, when
Right,
you face
experientially, you
right.
have no way of, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
the line illusion's a good example. Like, you can be told till the cows come home there are no the lines are the same length, but like I was just taking one of the boxes. I'm like, yeah, no, they're the same length, but my eyes still refuse to acknowledge this.
Yeah.
Does that mean that all of perception is impenetrable or just aspects of it?
Ooh.
Like imaginative construction has to be penetratable to like your cognitive faculties. So maybe if you have like a vivid imagination and you can actually visualize things, I'd say that's some penetration.
Yeah. Yeah, what Desmo said.
I think like a big thing when I was trying to understand cognitive penetrability was the fact that certain people consider priming to not count as penetration, and other people do consider it counting as penetration. Like how, I guess, like maybe implicit bias would be a good example of this, where some people think the fact that you have implicit bias, and maybe because of that bias, you'll like identify the criminal as someone that is black or like of color, and that is your cognitive faculties penetrating your visuals in some way. And other people say no. The fact that you're like primed to think things is always apparent, so you can't include that in the conversation of what cognition is actually penetrating. But yeah, I'm not sure.
That's cool. I mean, it's not cool, but I mean, my approach to a discussion like that is always that we need to get better at thinking in terms of continua, like more or less cognitively penetrable, and in terms of thinking about aspects, right? So there might be some aspects of priming where it is more cognitively penetrable, maybe in like the forming the initial priming, forming initial stereotypes, that kind of stuff. And some stuff that is less cognitively penetrable, maybe like later on when you've already like had those negative stereotypes reinforced, or hell, positive stereotypes. Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
Well, if we're still looking at things that are cognitively impenetrable, I might argue an aesthetic sense might be considered cognitively impenetrable. I mean, it can vary from person to person, but if someone finds something interesting to look at, like, they cannot on their own like, it might be recontextualized later, like you might find out the dude who made it was an asshole, but like lines and colors making just a painting that's just cool for that person to look at might be I don't want to I don't know where I'm going with this.
You know, like if you hear a cool guitar riff,
yeah like just having that sensation and that judgment, that would be something impenetrable, I would imagine.
Cool.
Also, then your ability to appreciate it and like understand it would like improve how much you like it, right? So it's like if
yeah,
you
I'm not talking about like the appreciation or the revilement of recontextualization later, like finding out the artist is an asshole. I'm talking about that immediate knee-jerk, that's visually appealing to me.
Okay, but what if you ever have it where your opinion changes because someone that you respect, like their opinion, you try to match their opinion, I guess? Because there are songs that I didn't initially like, but because someone that I liked liked them, I then started to like the song and such.
Yeah, but you didn't consciously choose to like the song. You
No.
did choose to consciously
Well,
like it then.
it was I didn't like the song initially. I didn't
Right.
choose that, I just didn't like it. And then
Right.
over time, when I realized that someone that I liked the song, I started to like it more, and now it's one of my favorite songs.
But you never consciously made the decision, is the point I'm trying to make. The aesthetic sense, the appreciation and acknowledgement of some inner intrigue or beauty or just nice soundingness about the song, whatever it is that's appealing about it, the act of acknowledging the appeal, that it has that appeal, wasn't something you had to choose to do. It's something your brain did on its own, right around the point that someone you really respected said, hey, I really dig this. And then you looked at it more deeply. That's the point I'm trying to make. I could be wrong, though. I'm just an undergrad.
Wouldn't I just have changed my aesthetics, though? So it was penetrable. It's like shifting.
I think what's going on here is really cool, because like let's say it's Justin Bieber's Baby song, right? And you're like, this is terrible, and then your sweetie is super into Justin Bieber, and And now, whenever you hear that, it like not only are you hearing the music itself, but it's reminding you of a moment or a person. So the entire perception, now starts involving a memory and a thinking about somebody else, which changes the perception. So there is some aspect of penetrability in some version of that, but then later on, now you've got it permanently associated with them. So now it becomes impenetrable again. You can't like. Have you ever tried to separate a song from your experience of it? It's hard.
Okay, but the interesting thing about the song that you mentioned is that I hated it growing up, but now whenever I hear it, I'm like, hell yeah, Baby by Justin Bieber's on. And then everyone goes crazy, even though we all hated it, we all love it now. So like
This is,
obviously
yeah.
it changes like
Well,
over time.
I might have penetrability wrong because I didn't think changeability and penetrability were mutually exclusive concepts. I thought it was just your conscious brain not having its hand on the lever. It's not the one in the driver's seat making the decisions. It's just going along with the decisions and justifying them after the fact.
Yeah, that's right. One of the fun things, so I feel the same way about all of the songs I hated as a kid, like Tub Thumping and Blue by Eiffel 65 and all of those. You get to a point in your life where it just reminds you of the past and you start thinking about it and it makes you happy again. It's the same as what they say about pictures. Like at a certain point in your life, you look at old pictures of yourself and you stop seeing the things that were wrong with them and only see your own youth. And so it's nicer to look at pictures of yourself. Maybe you guys aren't there yet. Anyway.
Would determinism mean that everything would be cognitively impenetrable, in the sense that if it's ultimately not your cognition really ultimately doing the thing, then, well, I mean, you're essentially just being sort of tugged along by laws of physics.
Very cool. Yeah, let's say, okay, so if determinism is true, then you are the result of your childhood and your genes and your environment, and your childhood and your environment were set that way by your parents' childhood and their environment and their genes, which were, you keep going all the way back, and all of a sudden it's just like a quark zapping another quark. I mean, I think once determinism is if you accept determinism is true, you get all of these questions with free will, with like, what is your consciousness at all? Do you have any agency? And that seems to follow. But I don't accept determinism as true. In fact, I don't think our best theories of physics take determinism to be true. So, yeah. Anything else on this before I let you all go?
Would
This
our
is fun.
ability to like perceive change?
Say that again. I'm
To
sorry.
perceive, would our ability to like with pain and like our pain receptors, like someone could be stabbed, know they're stabbed and they're not hurting. Like, is that another way? Like pain is impenetrable because like I can stub my toe and it hurts, but I can't turn off the hurt, even though like I'm trying really hard not to like curse in front of the kids I'm babysitting. Like, is that another form of like a cognitive impenetrability, or is that like your body's?
It certainly feels that way to me, but I've heard other people can like stop feeling about pain by thinking about other
Some
stuff.
people are born without pain receptors, and so they just don't feel pain.
We can bring up meditation again. A lot of people use meditative practices to dull pain.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people have a different experience with pain. Like when I stub my toe, fuck. It like takes priority over everything else that was going on. And for me, it's at least cognitively impenetrable. But some people, I've heard tell that they can like think about other things and stop feeling that pain.
But like if you were to look like at brain activity, even though they're like consciously choosing not to feel that pain, like their brain is still like, holy bleep and bleep, this has just happened, or like, so like would that be like two forms of like cognitivity? Is like you can consciously choose to feel your pain or not, while your brain is like screaming anyways.
Huh. Yeah.
It can also be like that thing you said with blind people, how they think they can see but they actually can't. 'Cause, like, I think about my mom who can't feel her legs, but I wonder, like, does her brain know she's in pain? Like, if she broke her leg, she wouldn't know unless she could, see it. She wouldn't feel it, but would her brain be like firing in a way she's not conscious of?
So there would definitely be some signaling from her legs. It would just not reach the part of her brain that she is aware of. So depending on where she's paralyzed, she can't, like it might reach her spine, but not go to other parts.
So it is just kind of like the blind thing, but with a
Yeah.
different body part.
Well, and then you can also feel pain in amputated limbs. So it goes the other way too. Like, and then it comes full circle with like the ways that they solve that is by having like a mirror box where you see your other limb in the mirror and it looks like it's the correct missing limb that's feeling pain, and then that actually solves the pain. So then would that mean that it is cognitively penetrable because you
Oh,
can
it,
change it
it
by
goes deep. It goes deeper down the rabbit hole than that. You take somebody who has both limbs, you take their limb and you remove it from their sight in like a black box situation, and then you tickle it with a feather while you show them a latex glove that's roughly on par with their skin tone, but objectively not their hand. Their eyes can tell that ain't my hand, and it's getting tickled at the same rate, and then you hit the fake hand with a hammer and they will say, ow. That is a thing that we've done.
Yeah, I've been there in that study, or I've been there in a psychology class that did that.
This class is just like Brain Games. You know the show Brain Games? It's just that.
It's like more serious Vsauce that I have to pay for sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about your processing of pain, of all of these things, is that, like, I mean, if you think about your thalamus or just your brain in general as just like an old-fashioned switchboard operator, you can imagine it going wrong a bunch of ways, and it can go wrong in ways that have these weird predictable outcomes where you like feel pain in a limb that doesn't exist, and the way you fix that is by unclenching your other limb and visually fooling yourself to thinking that that was your limb that you know cognitively isn't actually even there. It's just like moving away around with the like switchboard thing. Anyway, it's a cool concept, isn't it?
Yeah, on the last note, I don't want to hold anybody up, but like, isn't there a terminology for not feeling pain? And this is gonna sound pretty morbid if I recall. Like people who are like insensitive to pain or just don't feel it at all, don't typically live long because they never learn. Like, oh, the stove is hot. But if you can't feel pain, you can end up like, burning yourself to death, and most people don't live long apparently. So
I don't know anyone personally who has this trouble, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But from what I've read, a lot of it is proportion problems. Like they'll get in the hot tub and be like, oh, this is pleasant, but they won't realize that they're scalding themselves, so they'll turn it up to dangerous levels. Or with a shower head or something. It's less, oh, I know I'm going to touch the stove even though I logically know it's hot, and more they just don't realize that they've gone too far because they don't have that too far button going, hey, stop, the skin is falling off.
It's the same with people that don't feel fear or don't feel any of these other things that we have. Yeah, they don't live very long because stuff like that happens. Thankfully, those are way rare. It's extremely rare. It's much more likely that you're the kind of person that doesn't get to feel like happy. Sorry.
It actually did find with a recent study with the people who don't have a lot of the fear infrastructure in their brain, something that can give them to feel fear. And there we go. Thank you, Amanda. And if you take these people and you put them in a situation where they'll feel air hunger without realizing it, like you thin the air a little bit or something, they will go into a soul deep panic and just lose their fucking shit. Like, air hunger still causes fear for people who have that genetic no fear problem, which means that needing to breathe might be structured somewhere else in the
Earlier.
brain than the rest of the fears. Vsauce did a video covering this, and I'm not going to shill the dude, but, you know, it was an interesting thing. That's where I got it anyway. Got to cite the sources. Mutant now.
Awesome. Yeah. This is fun. It's a good class. Okay. I should probably let you guys all go unless anybody has anything else that they want to throw out. Next week, we get to look at animal videos. That'll be fun. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do it with a share screen. I might have to like switch back and forth.
Do we ever get to talk about babies? Or just animals?
Kind of babies.
What do babies do? Do they think? They're kind of stupid.
They are so dumb. they can't see like the Monte Carlo like or switch.
They
at
can't
all.
even move. Like, they just lay there.
And they're not even good door stops. Right? 'Cause yeah.
Before
So
a certain age, they like have no
Well, I have
moral
an
capacity
interesting
either. So like
thing
moral
that,
argument
with
comes
babies
in.
that could be interesting to show.
Sorry, Bailey was saying something. I don't think I quite caught that, Bailey.
Like with kids too, it's been shown that I think it's 3 or 5. One of them, like their moral understanding is 0. For like they're bred to be sociopaths. Like they will harm everybody, and you could not tell them or explain to them why, because they have no way of grasping it.
They don't even know that other people have like minds. At 18 months, they start like glancing longer at. You can tell by gaze length, but even at like age 3 or 4, they're still like not good at being able to tell that other creatures have minds. Yeah, stupid babies. They're so dumb. I'll try to talk about babies next week too. Yeah. What were you saying, Joseph? Sorry.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt Bailey, so I just typed it.
Oh, cool. Okay. Babies. Okay. So I guess I'll just let you all go, and we'll see you next week when we talk about animals and babies. Stupid babies.
Cool. Later, Carlos. Thank you.
Later.
Carlos.
Cheers.
I guess.
Carlos, I have a quick question.
Let's do it. Let me just pause
So you've used the example of like hitchhiking being less dangerous than driving, right?
Mhm.
But wouldn't hitchhiking automatically have the risk of driving within it?
I know. I actually hate that example, and every time I say it, I think, damn it. Actually, I know
It
I
took
hate
me a
it.
while to figure out what I had a problem with, you know?
And it is really troubling because that is the example they use in the literature. And every time I say it, I'm like, no, I have to come up with a better one because
Yeah.
there's hundreds of things that are better, but that is a subset of driving. Unless you assume you could hitchhike with like a horse-drawn carriage or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I just thought, yeah, that was kind of funny. So.
No, I appreciate that. I've had that thought a couple of times, and every time I still say it out loud because there's not an easier example that comes to my mind.
Well, and it came across quick too, you know, like because the statistics, you know, but
That it's
yeah,
incredibly illustrative because we all remember seeing at least people our age remember seeing hitchhiking things on the television while being
Yeah.
simultaneously told absolutely don't do that. That's fucking dangerous.
Right. But thank you. Yeah, no, it's bothered me every time I say it too. So I'm glad somebody else. Okay, I'll try to
right.
I'll try to come up with a more go-to example and
Yeah.
stop using that one.
All right.
All right.
Goodbye.
I'll see you
Have a good
guys.
day, guys.
See ya.
Adios.
Bye.